On the Leaders Who Care 120th episode. I'm so grateful today to share this moment with someone who is actually deeply passionate about sales and have invested a significant part of his life of making a difference, making a lot of changes and impact in the sales. In sales overall, but also learning from a lot of the mistakes that he made throughout. And I'm really passionate to welcome Collin Mitchell, who is a vice president of sales of Lydium, but also is a host of Sales Transformation podcast, and someone who is really helping many other people around the world with their sales and their transformation. Colin, thank you for taking the time today, and welcome on the Leaders Who Care.
Thanks so much for having me. Love the mission behind what you guys are doing here, and honored to come on the show and have a good conversation, and hopefully add some value for your audience.
Thank you indeed. We're on a mission to bring together some of the most caring leaders from every sphere and country and region from the world, which is probably will take until our lifetime. It's a long mission to do, and maybe we need some really power to fulfill that. But what's more important here is you are actually one of the first guests that is specialized in sales. Sales is so important to any business, and whether this is service, whether this is product, and what got you into the world of sales in first place? How did you decide to be there?
Yeah. Good question. So, the typical sales story is usually something like went to school for this particular thing, and realized it didn't serve me too well, so I got a sales job. Or went into this particular industry, found out I didn't love it that much, so I got a sales job, right? So kind of the typical story that you hear from many people who are in sales is they saw were set out to do something that didn't work out, and sales was their fallback plan. But that wasn't necessarily the case for me. I actually grew up very poor, raised by a single mom with three brothers, and didn't go to college. So I didn't have, a plan A, really. There was there wasn't a lot of opportunities or doors open for somebody like me. So getting my first sales job was what was the only plan that I had. And I knew that I had to make the most out of it. So when I got that opportunity, I did everything to make sure that I was successful. And, early days, it was really just working my butt off, right? Or first one into the office every day, last one out of the office every day, coming in on weekends. But, that's easy to burn out. That will only take you so far. And then, from there, I sort of advanced into sales leadership and then founding a few different companies and having successful exits.
Wow. So you consciously made that, and really, you have gone through this journey, working hard, then progressing to sales leadership. I'm very curious about that difference from a single sales quota person to sales leadership. The, what is the difference, and is it the major shift that happens when that occurs? Because people may be very good sales quota carry leader or person, but not necessarily be very successful of leading other salespeople.
You're so right about that. So, leadership in general is not for everybody, and it's not as necessarily. I think a lot of people think it's a lot easier than it really is, and especially in the sales world, it's so common for high performing sales reps to get promoted into leadership roles,
Hmm.
well before they're ready, without any real training on how to manage people, which is a very different skill set than being a great seller, right? Um, Knowing how to sell and train people on how to sell well is one thing, but to actually manage and nurture and provide support, and lead people to do great things is very different skill sets. And so a lot of mistakes that I made, and a lot of early sales leaders make is thinking everybody should do the job the way I do it, right? And that there's this one size fits all way to managing people or leading people to success, and you'll quickly find out that that's wrong. And hopefully you don't do it at the expense of people, right? Because if you're learning on the job how to manage and lead people, that can be very messy.
Well, what are the biggest mistakes that you made that shaped you as a leader or as really where you are today?
Yeah, I mean, I think the two things that stand out, and I think any sales leader can probably been through this, or anybody who's maybe an aspiring or up or coming sales leader, or maybe new sales leader, can help maybe avoid making this mistake. But the first thing is exactly what I talked about, right? Don't think that what worked for you is going to work for everybody. People are very dynamic people. What motivates them is different. They have different whys, they have different learning styles. So understanding that, and even just the psychology of people and different personality types and things like that all come into play on how to lead people differently. Not thinking that how you got the job done or what worked for you is necessarily going to work for everybody on your team. I think that's that can lead to a lot of mistakes. Just that way of thinking in general. And then the second thing is I think something that a lot of people struggle with in sales roles and as sales leadership roles or any leadership role. It really is recruiting, hiring and training people. It's a
Mhm.
very challenging task, and trying to do it on your own, and not having valuable resources that you can tap into is maybe that's a mentor or somebody who's done it before that can help you help save a lot of time, a lot of frustration, and avoid making a lot of mistakes, because just knowing what to look for when you're recruiting people is challenging. How to hire the right people, how to ramp up or train those people, that's a pretty big tall order for one person to take on that's never done it before.
I'm very curious because we're deeply passionate about exceptionally gifted talent who cares. So it's not just you can be gifted, but really have that area. And so you talked about how you on one piece is how you attract, and then how you assess, and then how you develop. So there's several different elements here. If we talk about the assessment piece first, how do you recruit? Uh, uh, how do you know that when you have people to your team, they have the potential or they are already great? What is your kind of a way of assessing?
Yeah, I mean, I think I like to start that process out a little bit differently than most people would, right? A lot of people look at resume, job history, they get into like skills, experiences, stuff that frankly initially doesn't matter as much as hiring the right person, right?
Hmm.
And so in the beginning of the hiring process, I'm much more interested in getting to know the person. What are some things that motivate them? What are some challenges that they've overcome personally and professionally? What's their story? Have they dealt with any sort of adversity in their life? Things like that, where I'm looking for exceptional people, right? Because teaching people sales or how to be better at sales, that part is easy. Finding people that are resilient, that are honest, good, transparent, people that want to do big things, and go far in life in general, that's the hard part. And so you're looking for those diamonds in the rough, right? And so in the initial process of screening people is, I don't talk any about job experience. I don't look at resume. I don't do any of that. I might browse their LinkedIn profile briefly, right? But I'm really trying to get to know the person. And that process kind of looks like asking them a lot of questions. I'm not talking much. I'm asking them questions. A couple of things. See, how do they handle sort of the pressure of getting a lot of questions in a short period of time? Are they, and there's certain things that I'm looking for, right? Are they feeding me the answers that they think that I want to hear?
Hmm.
Or are they being open? Are they being honest? Are they being vulnerable, right? Have they dealt with anything that's challenging, maybe personally, professionally? And if they did, What is that? How did they work through it? What did they learn from it? Things like that. So, and it always kind of throws people off, especially, candidates, because they're like, whoa, this is not what I expected, right? They show up to the interview thinking, um, we're going to talk about, how I made President's Club at my last job, or how I got, promoted from a sales development rep to a, senior enterprise AE in record time, or how I, hit my quota, you know, 23 of the last 24 months. They expect to talk about those sort of things.
Mhm.
And so quickly people can deselect themselves by just, it's easy to detect when people are feeding you the answers they think you want to hear, or they're not being fully honest, or maybe they're holding back something. Um, Obviously, you got to make it comfortable for them, and people aren't going to tell you their whole life story in the first 15 minutes you meet them, but some will, and a lot of times those are very exceptional people.
Well, if you talk about sales, and I would love to hear what is the main thing that has changed over the years in sales, if anything, if you think about it. But before we get to that, um, we hear different roles in the sales organization. So, putting in the sales leadership hat, and some organizations like to break down the sales of origination to um, sales to business development to really different areas. Some of them are account managers, the other ones are hunters. Um, do you have a way that you break that function, or are you looking at a full 360 salesperson?
I mean, it depends. Depends, what you're selling, who you're selling to, um, what your sales process looks like. So there's a lot of variables there of kind of
Hmm.
determining, um, is a full cycle sales rep the right answer for building my sales team? Breaking out the functions could be, um, the right answer, or a combination of both. And so, a lot has changed, especially with, tough financial times, major layoffs, especially in tech, where, there was a lot more resources of the sales function being broken up, where many sales development reps, supporting, a handful of account executives. Now, a lot of those resources have been cut back, so less sales development reps. A lot of people starting to shift towards focusing more on quality than quantity, right? For a long time, people have just been playing this more and more and more game, right? We just need more leads. We need, which means hire more people and, make more calls, send more emails, more opportunities, but we're only winning 20 or 30% of them in the first place. And so a long time people have been playing that game, and people are starting to take a step back and realize, well, hey, we don't necessarily need more leads. We just need to get better and more effective at working the ones that we have and making sure that we're working with the right ones. So a lot of stuff is starting to shift and sort of shuffle around of, what a sales team, looks like. Do we outsource certain functions like sales development? Do we have a combination of in-house, people versus outsourced people? Do we put a little more emphasis on our account executives, uh, to self-source and prospect some of their own deals? Do we start to change our strategy to more of a land and expand, meaning, great, we need to just focus on getting our foot in the door at whatever level that is, and then have some strong support on the delivery and CS side, knowing that our strategy is to get our foot in the door and expand those accounts that we win. So a lot of things are changing, on those fronts.
That is, I'm just trying to put myself into the shoes of those scale ups. Let's say that they're like the tech is a good example, but not only. And we see them also in products. We see them in services. And maybe we let's focus on those scale ups that service, SaaS, for example, or technology, or any other service that is being sold. And as a founder, when often founders do not have a lot of experience with sales, I mean, Sometimes they do, and they founded the company, but I see sometimes people with tech background founded a company, but they don't know how to structure a how to set up the company for success from the get go. So it's like if there was
Yeah.
a really a roadmap, if that makes sense, of a certain things that needs to be in place. What would be your advice to such audience? So they're founders, they're not expert in sales. They understand, of course, how critical is sales, but they would like to bring a person who can set this up for them. So that means it not we sometimes difficult because you cannot hire the sales leader from the get go. You may need to hire a sales leader, but it needs to be also a sales quota person. So it's like you got to be a single quota carry person that has the ability to scale up the sales organization, hire other people. What would be your approach to such a situation like this? You founded a lot of companies as well, I understand. So how do you approach that when a company is at this stage?
Yeah, I mean it's a tough question to answer because there's no single answer, right? The real answer is it depends, and I know that answer sucks, right? Because there's some things you got to look at, right? Do you hate selling, right? Or
Mhm.
are you open to pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone to learn a new skill that's essential to the survival of your business, right? And if the answer to that is yes, maybe it means getting a coach, getting a mentor, getting a consultant, or just eating and gobbling up every free resource that you can get your hands on to become better at the skill of selling yourself as a founder. Right? That's one path. Right? If the answer is no, and you're like, sales just scares the heck out of me, and I don't want to have anything to do with it. I'm a technical person. I'm a product person. Like, please don't put me in a sales role. It's the quickest way I'm going to go out of business. Maybe that's your answer. Maybe you should go, instead of saying I need a sales leader, I need you know a sales leader, part player, part coach. Instead of going that path, which is an option, maybe it's finding a co-founder, a late
Mm.
co-founder, or a co-founder that can sell. Selling is essential to the survival of your business, because even if you have the best service or you have the best product, if you can't sell it, guess what? Nobody cares. You're out of business, looking for a job.
Y-
So those are a couple different options, right? I think a lot of times people hire sales leaders too often, and the problem is a sales leader is more expensive, right? Maybe you just need an individual contributor. Maybe you need somebody who is a great individual contributor that's had some success in early stage startup type of environments before. That could be a great first hire. That has experience in prospecting and closing deals, and kind of can play those two roles that can maybe be molded into a sales leader. You know, I just think it makes no sense to get a sales leader until they have a team to lead. And so those are a lot of different options, but it highly depends on kind of where you are, what some of your answers to those questions are.
there's a few questions that come in my mind in this because sales is you're absolutely right. It's essential. I often feel that when I talk to people at various level, whether they're CEOs or different business leaders, when you say sales and even the word sometimes has negative charge.
Mm, yeah,
So and I also have my own really view on this, but um, if you really care about your customer, about your product, about the who you helping on the other side, technically speaking, you don't necessarily sell anything. You help, you serve, you solve a problem. So I don't know what's your view on this, and what role does care play into sales?
yeah. You're absolutely right. Sales has a bad reputation, right? And it comes down to many people at some stage in their life have had some sort of bad experience with somebody in sales, right? That could be from buying a car, to somebody cold calling them and being pushy and things like that, or even as a young kid, maybe their parents sharing their own experiences on them, right? Sales is one of the professions that people don't trust, and so, but there's a lot of people that are doing a lot of good work to try to change that, right?
Yeah.
And so if you are selling and over pushy and salesy and manipulative and dishonest and a lot of these things that people associate with salespeople, then yeah, it's going to be a struggle. It's going to be hard, and it's going to be something you're like, yeah, that's not for me. But you're right. Doing sales right means helping and serving, and doing good work for people. And that is a different breed of salespeople that isn't as commonly known or accepted by people yet.
How do you call those people? Is it business development? What is the right way to yeah, to name them? Because if you say a sale, you know, the way in my mind in linking to the negative charge is like I'm selling something that I don't believe in, type of thing. Like actually, whereas it's not always the case because you're actually making people aware of something that can solve their problem or they can help them. So I'm just trying to think of a way of expressing the word sales in a most representative way that really for those type of people that you mentioned, those that really care about their customers and what they do.
Yeah, I mean, the tough thing is it's still sales, right? Um, and you see a lot of times people changing their sales title to
Yeah.
consultant and um, different things, right? Technology advisor, or things like that, trying to hide the fact that, like, I'm not in sales, but ultimately you are. And if you think about it, we're all selling, right? Even people not in sales roles, right? You're selling your ideas to your leader. You're selling your opinions or preferences of, where you want to go out to dinner tonight with your spouse, or
Mm.
or what the best trip is for you and your friends or whatever. We are all selling in life, whether you admit it or know it. And so why shy away from it or try to hide it? Own it and do it differently. If you think sales is um, a something that gives you that negative energy, well, be different, right? The things that you don't like about people in sales, do the opposite, right? And so, and buyers are smart, right? Buyers are extremely smart these days. They're you know much more informed than they ever used to be. There's transparency with the internet and online and reviews and things like that. So it's a lot harder to get away with some of those tactics that the older maybe generation of sellers used to be able to do, and have built this negative charge that people expect from salespeople. Usually by the time a buyer even reaches out to a salesperson, they've already done a lot of research, right? They've
Mhm.
already, you know, they've already decided that this is how they're going to solve a particular problem. And they've already narrowed it down to a couple of options based on the reputation that maybe those companies have online. And so a lot has already been done by the time they're ever actually, talking to a salesperson, because of that fact.
Very interesting, and you're absolutely right because the technology enables us to do a lot more research, a lot more checking, background checking, and talking about the sales function. And you previously said that the hardest part of cold calling is willingness to get on the phone. Um, how can the first time timers, let's say people who are getting into sales, overcome this and the prospect of rejection?
Yeah, I mean, I think uh, part of sales, prospecting specifically, is learning how to deal with objection and not take it too personal, and getting to a place where you can sort of detach from the outcomes, right? Because there's going to be many times where you lose. The hardest part about sales is when you do everything right and you still lose, right? Because we want to know, what did I do wrong? What could I have done differently? What could I learn from this loss or opportunity? And sometimes there's nothing, right? Because when you're in sales, like, you know, you lose for a number of different reasons. You could lose to a competitor. You could lose because the budget for solving the problem that you solve went to something else totally unrelated to what you do. Or you lose to the fact that your buyer decides we're just going to do nothing, right? We call that losing to the status quo, right? And then there's even another option where, buyers are overwhelmed and essentially end up in this place of indecision where they just do nothing. And it's because buyers are, have maybe made decisions before that didn't turn out well, and they're too scared to make the wrong decision, so they do nothing. And we call that losing to indecision. And as a seller, it's your job to help them make a decision. That decision could be with you or maybe not with you, but that should be your job as a seller if you really want to help and serve your clients. But to kind of tie it back to like cold calling specifically, I know because there's kind of a two-part question there. Um, the best way you can learn is by through experience. Don't overthink it. Just jump in, get into action, and learn through the experience of making mistakes.
Wonderful. We are living in a world where there's more and more technology, and AI is really uh, getting into our lives in a big way. And does AI poses a threat to this to sales talent? And what is the future of sales look like with in the context and with the technology and the AI tools that we have available?
Yeah, I mean, I like to, this is a common question that comes up, and everybody is thinking about, AI is here. It's very powerful. Everybody has maybe seen that by now, whether they're using it in their personal or professional life somehow. Many people have been using AI for a long time and maybe didn't even know it, right? And the thing is it's more accessible now. And the thing is that AI is not going to take your job. Okay. But people that learn how to use and leverage AI, those are the people that will take your job. So you either
Uh-huh.
want to be those people,
Yes.
or do you want to lose your job?
Great advice. And um, when we talk about sales, sales excellence, really, how do we intertwine care into the sales excellence? What does that look like in today's world?
Yeah, I think it kind of boils down to one simple thing, right? You either care more about helping and serving the people that you're engaged with, in your sales job, or you care more about your commission. And that is the one simple thing that separates great sellers doing good things for people and helping and serving versus people that are only doing it for their own self-serving gains.
Mm,
And so, and a lot of people unfortunately are taught early on in their sales career some of those bad habits. And they
yes.
have to unlearn those and evolve as sellers. And so I think it really boils down to that one simple thing. Are you the type of seller that cares more about your own self serving advancements, AKA your commission, right? Or do you care more about really helping and serving people? And the thing that, sellers need to understand, if they don't already, is there's one thing that matters more than anything, and that is your reputation. As a business owner, as a founder, as a seller, your reputation is, worth gold, and it can either help you or it can hurt you in the long term. So you might cut some corners and get some short-term gains, but for long-term sustainability and whatever it is that you do as a founder, as a business owner, as a seller, as a sales leader, Your reputation matters. And so your goal should be to everybody that you interact with at any capacity uh, should be to make sure that they have a good experience, whether that means working together, not working together, maybe you work together and stop working together. The goal should be to make sure that they had a good experience and that you would be somebody that they would want to refer people to, regardless of the outcome of your relationship.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing this. It's so simple and common sense, but it's not very easy to do often because people, as you said, can get derailed focusing on their own interest, and that's obviously quite common what we see, and that's the reason for having these issues in sales. When you talk about the serving your customers and really it comes down to that reputation is so important for your future. What would be your advice for organizations that were led in a different way? Let's say there was different leadership, or there was different ownership, or even the founders made a mistake, but they evolved over time. But that reputation has kind of hanging over them. How could they reimprove, let's say, or change a perception, a reputation that the old mistake that made in the past? Simple, and it could be as open as that, because leaders evolve, people evolve, and everybody makes mistakes. So the question, if that has been the case, what would how could they change that perception? What needs to happen? It's a lot more difficult than starting fresh, but it's not often the
Yeah.
case.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're all human beings. We make mistakes. We're not perfect, right? The first thing is acknowledging it, owning it, and making a commitment to yourself and others that you're going to do better, right? And actions speak louder than words, right? So saying you're going to do something, you know, doesn't mean anything until you actually do it, right? And so you need to show people and not tell people, right? Look,
Mm,
I started out as a more selfish, self-serving seller
yeah,
where I cared more about my commission than everything else, and a prospect was nothing other than a transaction to me. And over time, I wasn't okay with that, and I had to evolve and become something different, to do greater things. And so I think a lot of people go through these transitions, and it wasn't even like, something that I did intentionally. It just sort of happened based on the environment I was in, what I learned, people around me, and so on. And then before you know it, you've created a bit of a monster. And this is very common in sales where there's a lot of, ego and bro culture and like, competitive people and so on. And so it's very common for these things to happen. But if you're that person that's made some mistakes, that wants to do better, just start doing it and don't talk about it. And over time, your reputation is something that you can build or even rebuild.
excellent. That's really encouraging to hear as well. You mentioned you were that person before. How did it feel? Why did you felt you have to change? What was your inner state at that time? Because clearly that was a major trigger for you. That was something that you
Yeah.
were not happy with. What was? How did you realize? How did you come to that realization? Was it exhausting you? Was it? What was the feeling when you were?
Yeah, it was during my transition from sales leader to founder, and realizing that, like, hey, my reputation really matters, and it matters more than ever now, and it's all that I have. And doing what's right isn't always easy, but that's what I need to do no matter what, right? And so it was that transition from sales leader to first time founder where I really started to understand, building relationships and building your network and building your reputation and building your brand, right? Your brand is not just, what you post online. It's, who you are online and offline, and, how you treat people. That's your
Mhm.
brand. And so understanding that those things matter more than anything if you want to be successful in life and in business, and taking it very seriously, and putting that into action and not just talking about it.
Wonderful. Well, that way you will not get exhausted, because I know people are successful using the selfish, let's say, methodology and focus, but I also know that they're deeply unhappy and unfulfilled. It's
Yeah.
often we see a correlation, at least from what I observe in my own experience in the past, and seeing people that could be very successful, but in selling, but at the same time they just care about a transaction, and really that's something which. What would be your advice to those people that may be listening and say, "Hey, maybe that," but some of them may never change, may not want to change, but if they're willing to do so, um, how do they start? Like maybe they've not realized it yet, but
Yeah, I mean, typically, I mean, most people don't change until their current circumstances get uncomfortable enough where, they kind of have to. And so, doesn't always go that way, but it doesn't have to either, right? It doesn't have to get so painful or uncomfortable or exhausting or burnt out, um, to the point where like it's even affecting your mental health, right? It doesn't have to get to that point, right? If you're feeling a certain way about something, you know you have the opportunity to change that. It's up to you to do it, right? We are our worst enemies, and we typically get in our own way. So, and maybe you need some help or some mentorship or some resources, and you know just get into action. And that's the best way to start to change. And over time, it will get easier, but that transitional period is definitely can be challenging.
thank you so much, really, for sharing those insights. It's been very helpful. You mentioned earlier in the conversation things evolving, and it's not always about the quantity of how much you have, how many leads you've generated. Yes, that's the most tangible way to measure the number of sales, but are they profitable? Are they quality? And what is your take on the balance between the quantity and quality when streamlining the sales process?
Yeah, I mean, highly depends on what you do, right? Lower value product or service, transactional short sales cycle. Well, in that case, quantity matters a little bit more, right?
Yeah.
Um, you know, Larger value deals, higher ticket, product or service, where spending more time with less people is what could help you be successful, right? Where in that scenario, if you try to focus too much on quantity, it actually hurts you more than it helps you.
Yes.
So I think that the real question is, how effective are you in what you're doing? And what that means is, like, are you winning more than you're losing? Right? That then most people are not. Most people are losing way more than they're winning. It seems that, over time it's become acceptable, to only win 20 or 30% of the time, which seems ridiculous. It means that, you know, you're okay with losing 70 to 80% of the time. That is not excellence, right? And so, there might be some things that need to change to increase your effectiveness in what you do. That could mean focusing more on quality over quantity, or changing, things completely. So I think, the answer depends on what it is, what you do, and some of those factors. But the real question is, how effective are you in what you're doing? Are you winning more than you're losing?
Thank you so much indeed for sharing those. Again, one final point here, when it comes down to you personally, how do you take care of yourself to stay effective, to serve your customers?
Yeah.
What is your way of recharging yourself, of growing, building yourself?
Yeah. Great question. So I'm actually really glad you asked that, because, it's different for everybody, right? I'm a morning person. I'm a person of routine. I'm big into self care and things like that, because a lot of people think like, oh, I need to be better at sales. I need to, be better at marketing. I need to skill up in my, professional career to advance. And to some extent, those are true, but not as much, not as important as you might think. In my experience, investing in myself more personally is what's been what has helped me be more successful professionally, right? So example would be, I'm not working 10, 12, 15 hours a day. That's not my thing. That's not going to lead you to success. I work 8, 9 hours a day. I take off early often to spend time with my kids and my family. Um, and I accomplish, in a quarter what takes most people an entire year, because I can be very effective, right? And so what that means is when I'm working, I'm very focused, and I'm very focused on specific things, right, that are advancing and building revenue. But when I'm not working, I'm not working, and I'm doing things to take care of me, which means spending time with my family. Um, have a morning routine, exercising, meditating, journaling, consuming educational value, um, doing things like that, simple things like drinking a gallon of water a day, things like that. So, you know, to answer your question, the secret to success professionally is taking better care of yourself personally.
I very much relate to this, and really think often this is very simple, um, but it's a good reminder that we should really pay attention to what we do every day, and it's the consistency that makes the difference. That is continuous, and I love what you mentioned about effectiveness. Really, to focus on how to improve your productivity, how to improve your effectiveness, is so important and key. We love this final question often to really ask our audience um, and also guests here is, if you are in a position to make a profound difference to the world, what is one thing you would love to see for more caring, more positive world?
Ah, man, that's a tough question, but I think the simple answer is, just try to respect it. I think there's a lot of divide amongst people,
Mm,
for different reasons. Could be political, religious, ethnicity, like whatever. There's just a lot of divide amongst people generally, and it drives me nuts. Right? Try to respect other people's opinions, and maybe just because they believe something differently than you or look differently than you doesn't mean that you can't be friends with them or respect them or not be so divided.
wonderful. What a great message. And that's why we say care doesn't have limits, and it goes above a lot of those differences, whether they're political or whether they're certain beliefs. And really thank you for the audience that is listening, or founders or sales leaders or even CEOs that might need your advice, help, and may want to reach out to you or even be part of your podcast. What is the best way to reach out to you?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that people should definitely do is one, make sure that they've subscribed to this show, written a review and given it a rating, and shared the show with their friends, because it takes a lot of work to put on a good quality show like this and consistently give back and release good content that's valuable for people. So the best way that listeners can show their gratitude is by doing that first. And then if you're in sales or a founder that sells or interested in learning about selling, we do drop daily sales content on sales transformation on whatever podcast app you're listening to this on. That's the best way to connect with me, learn more about Medium, or anything new and exciting that's going on with us there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Colin. I really appreciate you and giving so much insights. Blessing goes to you and your team and your family, and thank you so much. And we wish you well in everything you do.